Hi.
You. All right, it doesn't stop. We have had a great session with Cassandra and Crystal on the insurance sector perspective on mental health. And next up, we've got another great session on mental health and the financial sector. All right, so I think a key part of I think everyone's life it's finance, right? Money makes things, right? We have to kind of pay for our bills and do things and everything else as well. So we've got a good session coming up, a great session here where we are bringing on an expert in this space, right? The financial sector from a brand that I know, I use, and I think a lot of you guys would know as well. The Chief Operating Officer of Stashaway, Nandini Joshi, it's here with us on this next session, where we're going to cover a bit more about mental health and the financial sector and how both are actually a lot more intertwined than we realize, and actually how from Nandini's point of view, how financial wellness is also a big thing that we should think a bit more about as well. So without further ado, let's pause screen share. Let me introduce our panelists here as well. First and foremost, welcome Nandini and Linda as well. Great to have you both join this session.
Thank you very much. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. I know we've done a different talks before, Nandini. I'm glad to have you join the festival here today. To quickly introduce the panel and also quickly to reintroduce myself for those that just joined in. My name is Theodoric. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Intellect, and I'll be your moderator for this session. And we have the honor of having Nandini Joshi, the COO of Stashaway, a fintech company, a great company that helps individuals and organizations with their financial wellness. And I'll let her share more on it a bit. But we also have Linda Rin, who is a clinical psychologist and the clinical ops lead at Intellect as well, who will bounce ideas with us and share more from a clinician's point of view. But first and foremost, Nandini, if you don't mind, a quick introduction about yourself, your role in Stashaway as well.
Thanks very much. Yeah, so I'm Nandini. I'm the COO at Stashaway. We are a digital wealth manager with a mission to help people build long-term wealth. So what we do is really democratize, how in the past you've had very high hurdles to be able to have access to sophisticated investment frameworks, and through technology, obviously, but equal parts through our investment office. We bring that to everyday people like you and me. So one of the things that I wish existed when I was in my 20s. So thanks very much for inviting me, because education and financial education and really empowerment through it is something that is very, very near to us.
I'm sure it is, but thanks for sharing a bit more. I'm sure a lot of folks that are listening and do know Stashaway. You guys have done a great job really growing the brand and awareness. So great to have you with us. Linda, if you don't mind, just a quick introduction of yourself as well.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and to be speaking about this topic. My name is Linda, clinical psychologist and clinical and operations lead at Intellect. I work with a lot of people on individually on many different kind of topics. I usually, we're covering mental health, and I'm super excited to be here to talk about these two topics, which a lot of times are both taboo topics, mental health as well as talking about money. Usually something that you say, I'll leave that to somebody else. So I really appreciate to have this open space here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Linda. And you're right, not surprisingly, but it really came to mind that financial matters is one that we don't openly talk about with people around us. So in some sense, mental health and financial wellness is one that closely intertwines in the stigma of addressing it publicly as well. So we'd love to hear a bit more of Nandini, how you think about it. So first question, Nandini, just to open the conversation, how do you see mental health broadly speaking? But more importantly, how do you actually see financial, the aspect of it relating to its mental health as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, for us, we see everything around your finances as a tool to achieve other things in your life. It's a way to empower people, and more, it's quite proven that bringing, having a sense of mental wellness and mental health, where your finances stand and what your financial position is, plays a really big role in it. And obviously a lot of research got done over the last year and a half and all. But, even before that, it was quite clear that, almost 60% of stress in general comes from financial matters. But over the last 1.5 years, as people have started to have other stress factors, where especially financial stress that has come in either through job loss and the pressure on the financial position, or even if you are not somebody who had a job loss, but just everything around you has added to that space of worry, and contracted your space of control, and for us, we continue to see financial position and a healthy financial position as a key part of being able to manage that worry out and manage control better.
That's a good point. I think that's truly, I think, important to note, and I'll love to have you expand more on what you think there of how actually finances is a big thing that everyone matters to everyone, right? You put food on the table, you eat, and you live in the finances. So it intrinsically ties towards how you feel. If we feel financially, insecure about the sense, it affects how we actually live our lives in that sense. So I'll dig into that point in a bit more. But Linda, what do you think? Like in your own practice, you work with a lot of people in different walks of life. I am not saying for everyone, I'm sure in some cases the financial aspect comes to mind for the stresses as well. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, there are many different aspects to this link between mental health and finances. A couple of small examples would be self-care is really advertised, and especially a couple of years ago, self-care was really advertised as that $100 massage that not everybody can afford. And then a lot of times this link is like, okay, well, if I don't have the money for this massage, that means I can't take care of myself. Nowadays, it's a bit more, okay, self-care can be anything from a walk to lighting a candle or whatever it is. But then there's also that aspect of, being able to afford professional mental health, whether it's coaching, whether it's psychology, psychiatry, anything like that. And then there's the big topic, I think, which is this chicken and egg of poor finances or financial stress and poor mental health, where maybe you have some financial difficulties which cause stress and anxiety and overall have a negative impact on our mental health. Now, bad mental health also makes it much harder to earn money, to manage your money, to spend wisely. And then you get stuck in this cycle where, it's really hard to get out of. So I guess that's the big one, but there are many different aspects of how they're linked, definitely.
That's a good point. So I'm just for the audiences that's tuning in, I see some of you guys are raising hands. If you guys have questions, feel free to throw it in the Q&A column. We will be doing our best to address it at the end if we have time for that. But yes, do feel free to throw it there. So that's a good point, right? Moving on to the next piece, adding on to what Linda you mentioned, but also moving to the next piece where it ties towards finances and mental health. Nandini as well, right? So I'm sure at Stashaway, you guys have a lot of different things you look into, right? Of how actually mental health links towards finances, and one of the things that are behind the driving factors of stress. One of the things that I think I know you want to touch on this as well. It's how actually a lot of people actually cite finances as a stressor in that sense. So if you don't mind just sharing a bit more about how at Stashaway and from your own perspective, where the ties comes in, and what are some stuff and stats that you guys have found in your own research as well?
Yeah, I think, for you to be able to manage better and ensure that your financial position continues to be a tool for you to do better things rather than a place of stress, I think everything is about being prepared. Everything is about, taking regular things almost, just like you do for your health and all, it's not about, oh, when I have a problem, I will deal with it. Just like anything else, dealing with something when the problem is already there is not the optimal way. Prevention is always better than the cure. And so, we stress a lot about, the right habits to build as early on, and especially the right habits to build when you are in the good times, when you are in decent financial position, or when you're starting to build your financial position, we all learn as kids, we are given a pocket money to spend. And I think it's such a weird thing to teach people, and really putting the saving part, or preparing for something in the future as outside of it. So, but obviously, as soon as you start to have an income coming in and all, thinking about what are the right habits to put very quickly, especially when you are in a comfortable position. So, building your emergency fund, building a cash position to understand what do you want to protect yourself from. So, what are the key things that if that income is disrupted, that you would take care of? Looking at, what would do you have dependents, and, ensuring that you have an understanding of the needs of the dependents. But then, equally looking at how you are prioritizing things like health insurance, or prioritizing things like term life insurance, so that, the bigger unforeseen things. And the best time to actually start to work on these things is when you are in a good position, and prioritize them. Obviously, right now, I think in the last 2 years, what everybody has learned is really also just looking at their spending from a different lens. And, that alone helps so much for you to think about what you want out of your finances in your life, and coming back to that circle of control at all time, that you are making those choices. So I think the most important things to start off with in relieving yourself, or actually preventing any time to fall into financial stress, is really thinking along your most basic things of emergency fund, the insurance that you want to cover, and then understanding your spending habits, and really understanding, do they drive value in your life?
Makes sense. I think that's a lot of insights you packed in there. So I'm going to try to break into the parts that stood out to me. So I think one of the key things that you mentioned, which is, I think, really relevant to its mental as well, is having a preventative approach towards your finances in that sense, right? I think a big part of things, it's not just kind of responding to it once things happen, when things hit the fan, and then things struggle, right? But what are ways that you can be preventative towards tackling this? And just like mental health, a lot of it's being proactive these days, right? You don't wait till you are in this severe distress to see a psychiatrist or psychologist. You try working on it earlier on as well, which is what and we're trying to do more. But the other point you mentioned, which is a great thing that I want to highlight and get into more, it's two parts, right? One is that how do you tackle, okay, firstly, what triggers stress? Financial stress is one of it. So in a sense, if you don't have your finances properly handled right, it would probably trigger certain worries for you as an individual. And the next thing is this, right? What are steps you can take to actually remedy the financial stresses that you would have, which you mentioned a few things, right? As Stashaway's name very aptly covers, stashing away funds to actually for a rainy day, and it's also a great name. But I think directly in itself, if you have, if you identify what the triggers of your stresses are, it can be physical health, it can be financial health, it can be different things. But if one of the pillars is financial health, that matters a lot. If you handle that well, it would naturally alleviate a lot of the stresses that we face as individuals. So I want to get into that piece a bit more. What are steps that the folks listening in can take to actually prevent financial stresses? You mentioned a few examples, having an emergency fund and stuff like that. Do you mind going a bit deeper? And I'll bounce it towards Linda to add on to this point as well.
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things to consider is, what is your risk profile? So, because a big part of, financial stress comes about is, whether you're, especially if you're invested, how the markets go up and down. So COVID or no COVID, markets have cyclicality. And, being invested in a way which does not reflect your true risk profile is probably the biggest factor that can bring in that stress. and you actually taking then decisions that might not be the best for your overall long-term finances. So I think thinking about your risk profile, and a lot of people end up thinking that, oh, I have to actually find my way to a more aggressive risk profile. And somehow people kind of have this high risk, high return type of mental mapping, which actually is not true, because a big part of high return in the long term is based on you staying invested for those 20, 30 years. And you're not going to be able to stay invested for those 20 to 30 years if you are not actually making sure that your risk profile is rightly reflected. So suddenly the markets go down by 10%, 15%, 20%, which has happened in the past. Your capability of staying invested is actually your high risk and high return, profile. So, and even at Stashaway, we focus really a lot around your high return is really first catered by what is your risk profile, because staying invested is super important. And I think then the second part is to really understand your finances in a way that you continuously, dollar cost average, and that you continuously make contribution to your investments in the long term, or whatever, financial goals you have set, whether they are, into going as low as a fixed deposit to, really thematic portfolios or high risk, whatever you want it to be. But being consistent into it is really important, because again, markets will behave, over a long period of time, always in a favorable manner. But you being able to put that money consistently in small bets, ensures that you are buying at every level, and therefore coming, ending up in the long term at your highest return profile. So I think those two things are really important. Don't take on more than you can chew. So understand very carefully, but make sure that, even if it is $50 to start with, that $50 in 10 years time is going to look very different. But if you don't start with the $50, you cannot think that one day I will have the comfort and the knowledge to put $500 a month. So I think that consistency and catering to your risk profile is probably the biggest way to alleviate those stress factors.
Those are great ones. So consistency as well as your risk profile, and just tying it back towards the theme of mental health, I think it's so relevant in what you just shared, right? In many ways, the risk profile piece of what you just shared closely relates to how we see our mental health. I'm sure Linda has thoughts on that piece as well. If you understand what your natural tendencies to actually, how we like to be comfortable versus being out of the comfort zone, how much risk you like to take, how adventurous, how introverted, extroverted you are, that applies to different facets for life. And in this case, very specifically, how you also handle your finances as well, right? When you invest, do you want to have a high risk, high reward, or a slow, lower risk but long return kind of profile of things? So I think that's an interesting point, and being consistent, and that also closely links towards how we practice mental well-being, right? If you're consistent in your practices, you go for your daily walks, you have your rituals where you take time to yourself, you journal, whatever it is, that helps, and that applies to mental financial side of things as well, right? By being consistent in setting clear boundaries as to how you view and how you trade and how you do things. I think that very closely intermingles with different sectors, but same principles in that manner, in that sense, right? So then what do you think? Like how do you think, or would you build on what Nandini mentioned of the risk profile that we have and what she mentioned as well?
Yes, 100%. I think you summarized it really well. That and it's also this preventative approach that you're also talking about, Nandini. Like, you want to get started with small things first. Invest those $50, and the parallel analogy would be take that 10-minute break, and then you build on that, and eventually you'll be comfortable investing $500. You'll be comfortable taking a day off if you're not doing well with your mental health. And I think that's a really good comparison, and definitely also when it comes to the risk profiles. I guess what I would like to add on is I've talked to a couple of clients on the topic of financial stress. Now, obviously, I am not a person to give any kind of financial advice, but where I usually come in is when they've had this discussion with somebody like you, Nandini, or anybody else at Stashaway, and says, okay, I figured everything out. I have a plan. I know what I want to do, but how do I do it? And I think that's like a bit of a second step, where I often talk to them and say, okay, you have the plan. I'm not going to give you any advice on this plan, but let's see how to implement this on your everyday life. Or we have conversations about, okay, I just invested that $50 and it went down. I'm panicking. How do I deal with the panic? And I think that's also kind of where mental health comes in. And it's that nice link between financial literacy and also, you know, knowing yourself and knowing how you might react if things go bad or go good.
It's a good point, right? Yeah, sorry, Nani, go on. Go for it.
No, absolutely. And look, again, that's the point, right? Like, are you comfortable seeing that first $50 go down to $48? You know, because you cannot, we don't recommend trying to time the market because very,
I thought you were going to say go down the drain, but no, go down the 40.
But again, you know, and this is where, you know, it's to say you will be comfortable investing that $50 in a much more longer term portfolio because you already have $1,000 that is first in your emergency fund. And therefore, you know, it kind of tells you that, okay, I can deal with the $50 going a little bit down because I know I will not need it for 2 years or 3 years because I have the $1,000 in the emergency fund, which I know will never go down. And I think to think of it in those incremental steps is really important. And which is why, you know, the emergency fund is something that we advocate as the first thing, you know, apart from paying down very high interest debts, because that's, again, a very big stressor for people, you know, when you just see the interest on your debts going up. But along with the high interest debt, you know, emergency fund is one thing. If you are secure with it, it just allows you to have the mental space to, you know, take back control, actually remind yourself, no, I was putting this $50 in because I know I do not need it for the next 2 or 3 years. And being able to say that to yourself is really important. But if those are your first $50, yes, even them going down by $2 is going to make you panic because, again, that wasn't the risk profile at which you currently were sitting. So I think thinking about that is the timeline of your risk is as important as thinking of the quantum that you want to start with.
That's a really good point by different. I think just hearing you mention this, Nandini, and hearing what Linda mentioned, it all connects, right? Like how actually you understand your profile, your risk profile, how you are as an individual, and taking steps and bets towards, you know, tackling this as well. If you have got a safety net in place, your emergency fund, in any, in this case, financially, if an emergency fund, because you have it there, it gives you the assurance that you can do more, right? I think that ties towards what I wanted to do, what came to mind now. I think it's relevant to share. Finances of any individual is a key thing of anyone's life, much less people in Singapore or Asia itself, right? I think a big part that we're always thinking of and hearing of it's financial freedom, right? How do we be free? And that's a goal that a lot of us have, that we strive towards, right? You're working towards things. We all have different goals, but one of the things that is true for some people, quite a lot of people, is that I want to be financially free to do whatever I want. And that's my peak happiness in that sense, right? Whether that's true or not is something else, you know, there's more towards happiness than just being financially sound. But I think that's a big part of giving you the assurance to, as you said, Nandini, go and explore and do different things. Not just make more bets, but also do things because you have that mental space of having this side of your life, a big part of it covered, right? So I think that's a big part where it's so closely intertwined. A lot of us think of our own financial stability, and we relate our self-worth towards how we're doing financially as well, a lot of times, right? I think that's one where, Linda, from your own, I think, practice, that's probably something that a lot of us relate to, right? Your career progression, your financial stability, like these are things that we think of in mental health, but that ties so strongly towards how we do financially as well. So a great point there. You've already briefly alluded to this, but I want to build on towards the next piece, right? We've touched on how like people can actually approach finances and also financial wellness, right? Being preventative, having an emergency fund, putting in place safeguards that would give you the assurance. But say something happens, right, and things like that. What are ways we could practice that prevents or mitigates financial stresses when they come up? Say it happens. So this is an open one. There's no clear answer clearly. But Nani, what do you think about this? When something does happen, how do we actually handle this in a sound way? And I'll pass to Linda after to add on to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, it depends so much on, who are the people around you, what is your financial position. But I think the first thing to really look at is say, okay, how do I hone in to what do I need to spend for to keep a roof over my head, and roof over your head has multiple choices over there, and how do you just make sure that you are healthy from a physical perspective. So you prioritize things and you say, what do I cut out? I think knowing what is truly discretionary spending in your life is very important. And you would be amazed at how many times actually people think of many things which are discretionary in their life as actually necessities. And this is the lifestyle factor that continuously creeps up in our life, and is not always tied to just salary going up or not, but it's just what we get exposed to. Those things really creep up. So really taking a very, very clear look on what is true necessity is really important. The second part is, to get yourself out of a financial situation, first of all, make sure that you understand fully the financial situation that you are in. Is there an interest? Are there clauses to certain things? Understanding what could be, if you have been making, for example, in Singapore, CPF contributions and all in the past, are those things that you could actually utilize now for some help? So truly understanding the nitty-gritty of your financial situation, and perhaps, if you don't have the knowledge fully yourself, then, get the help to understand that is really important. But because again, you can understand what right now can be an asset for you and what right now is a drain, so that, you can kind of manage those two things. And then the third part is, don't be afraid to ask for help. All of us have some families, some friends around. I know sometimes this can be a very difficult conversation to have, but you don't get what you don't ask for. And if you are in financial stress, asking for some help is right now the right thing, to get you out of that situation. And obviously, that also has an impact on, if you have a support circle around you, that also has an impact on how quickly you can bring yourself mentally back to a space to make better judgment calls, rather than just trying to think of firefighting. So, those three things, if you have been in the working life, you've been putting around out CPF and all, understand what is available to you and what is really not. Review your spending immediately and, take actions over there, and then look at your support circle. No support is too small.
Yes, those are great points there. I think it's really something you put in place really good steps, right, as to how we can reassess the situation, knowing what's necessary towards having a support circle in a sense of what we have around us. Linda, what do you think? What would you add to that?
Well, first of all, completely agree. And I think we have to give a kudos to companies like Stashaway who make this really accessible, especially to the younger generations. I know myself, getting started with my first job, it was very nerve-wracking to have to look into finances because I don't know anything, and it feels like everybody else knows everything. And even contacting a company that would be able to advise me was very nerve-wracking because I felt like, oh, I should be knowing much more, and I will ask embarrassing questions. But I think when I take a quick look at Stashaway's website, it's so approachable already. And I think definitely that's the first step. Like you say, Nandini, I completely agree with everything. From my point of view, they're the kind of the two options. Number one is kind of the external change, like you say, all of these things that we can kind of implement to make our situation better, to really figure out where we want to go. But then there's that second component of that internal work as well, which you touched on a little bit, that it's in the end, financial stress is just like any other kind of stress. And we will need to make sure that we also figure out how we react to it. What can we do when that stress comes up? Definitely, we want to try to keep that stress away from us as much as possible. But, you know, having things in place, knowing that in the moment when I'm super stressed, you know, getting a hug from a loved one, doing something creative, you know, physical exercise, going for a walk, talking to a friend, whatever it is really helpful for me to get out of that stressed moment, regroup, and then say, okay, what do I do next? Or, you know, then there are of course these long-term things, like you want to make sure you eat well, you exercise a lot, have that leisure activity, enjoy your work, all of these things that we know we need to do, but they do have a big effect on how we handle stress, whether it's from finances or from anything else. And I think those two in combination will really set us up to be resilient in the moment, but also for anything that's coming in the future.
Those are great points. Thanks, Linda. I think it makes a lot of sense. One of the next things I want to touch on, and given because you are for sure way more than we are a financial expert on the topic of finances as well. So and as a company that sees trends on the broader scheme of things, right, Nandini, I'd love to hear a bit more about from your perspective at Stashaway, or even your own perspective as well. What are some interesting trends that has come up since the pandemic has happened with how people are handling finances, how they trade, how they deal, and how, I think just on the point of that, I think it would be interesting for us to hear what are trends that you guys have seen as well, specifically towards financial matters.
Yeah, I mean, I think for whatever other pain came through COVID, you know, the good thing that has happened in the last 2 odd years is that a lot of people have spent a lot of time improving their financial literacy. You know, we saw a huge number of spike in our webinar attendance, you know, everything from investing and financial basics all the way to more advanced topics. So, you know, knowledge at the end is where power lies for every individual. And I think this was really great to see that just so many people spent time getting that knowledge in. And, you know, as they got that knowledge in, you know, they, and obviously due to external factors, people saved. But then having that knowledge meant that they went also back to actually being more conscious of their daily spending. You know, people just realized, because suddenly they couldn't spend, you know, at least for the first months of the lockdown and all, there were just so many people who suddenly realized what that gap between their inflow and, you know, at the end of the month was. And when that kind of got forced to go away, so many people realized just how much was the outflow. And still, you know, and I'm still talking about people who kept their jobs, you know, they had a roof over their head, they were eating well, and still they saw just such a big change in their end of month bank balance. So it actually got a lot of people into redefining, you know, what conscious daily spending really meant. And therefore then, you know, undertaking better financial planning. So, you know, we launched the Stashaway plan tool, which is free to use, you know, for you to look at how you build your net worth and how you put together the building blocks of it. And, you know, just a very organic uptake of that tool was just so massive over the last months, because with the knowledge, you know, with really realizing the impact of the spending and, you know, and some more tools arriving to people, they were putting it to use very, very quickly. Other than that, one thing which we really noticed, and I think in general we've seen, is people are developing a sense of legacy. You know, I think more and more people, it gave them the time to think, okay, what do I want to teach my children? You know, up till now, we have always known that, you know, healthy eating habits and all are usually a part of legacy that is passed on. But, people have actually really started to think about how they pass on a good financial knowledge and habits as part of the legacy. So again, underpinned by the education boom and the financial literacy boom that has happened over the last 2 years, I think has propagated the rest, which is really great to see.
That's a great point. I really like the fact that you're mentioning a few key points of how actually people are now really looking at how they spend, how they save, but also importantly, how people are now looking to build a legacy in a sense of how actually they leave money and wealth for the generations that to come with them as well. Right? It's a lot more longer term thinking, which I think is great points there. One of the questions that just came in, right, and folks that are on the session, feel free to throw in questions that we can also attend to. One of the last things I want to ask you as well is to the Q&A. So someone has asked in, if you are of a low income background, how can you get support from? I mean, I'll spin a little bit, right? Someone said how to get support for himself, Nandini. So I'll say beyond that, maybe you could share a bit more about how Stashaway actually helps democratizes access towards financial freedom in the sense of what you guys offer. So feel free to share a bit more on that end as well. What does Stashaway do?
Yeah, so I think again, from an education perspective, just knowing what are the options available to you and how you should think through them is at the end a very powerful, right? Knowledge at the end is really important. And so, in our app, you don't have to be an investor to have access to our Stashaway Academy, where, there are a series of courses that you can follow at your own pace. To just gain that knowledge, and again, that empowers you to start with those first $50, whether that's with Stashaway, whether that's in your bank, and understand what should you ask about, how should you think through fees, how should you think through your risk profile. I think those building blocks are available in the app to anybody. So you don't have to worry about what resources you have, and you can access that. I think more from other support perspective, I don't know I mean, I would say from a personal experience, I go for a 5-kilometer walk every day outside. It doesn't cost me anything, except just making sure I prioritize that every morning. And I know that if I miss that even a single day, I feel fidgety, as hell. So, it's just impossible for me to get through my day if I haven't kind of gone and gotten that out of the way in the morning just to rejuvenate. But yeah, I mean, look, so much is available as resources. I know sometimes the internet can be a little bit overwhelming, but there are plenty of companies that have also customer service departments that are really happy to answer people's questions, including Stashaway, and people should really take advantage of that openness, I think, that is today in companies to interact with, potential customers or even far down future clients.
Great point. So a number of things. One is actually taking on the resources out there, whether it's on Stashaway's Academy, on the internet, but also importantly, having simple practices like going for a walk like you do, Nandini, in the morning, or whatever else that you guys may have to do so. Really, really helpful. So we were almost at time. I just want to pass to Linda and Nandini yourself as well. For one final tip for those listening as to how can you handle financial stresses, or what's one tip that you have for those tuning in on financial wellness as well. So maybe Linda, I'll start with you firstly on what you have for those tuning in.
Yeah, definitely. I think from my point of view, when it comes to financial stress, cater towards it like any other stress that you would. Try to, there are these in the moment things that you can do: progressive muscle relaxation, meditation, talking to a friend, but definitely also consider the more long-term things that will help you be more resilient to stress coming up. So it's not always about just helping yourself in the moment, but also kind of building that resilience, whether that's, a 5-kilometer walk every day, exercising, and working on your self-talk habits or anything like that. And then I think one more thing I wanted to mention as well is that in this conversation, we talked a lot about mental health issues, financial issues, but I think there's also that positive part about it of saying like, okay, maybe you're not in financial stress right now, maybe your mental health is fine, but then look at, okay, where can I take this? What are some, money dials, let's call it, where you really want to spend something that you really enjoy, or what are some habits that you really want to build, and talk to maybe a psychologist or a coach on setting that up, and really taking things also in a positive perspective. So no, it's not always about prevention and working with the issues, but also that bigger goals and where you want to take it, whether it's mental health or finances.
Good point. Nandini, what about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And look, I think especially from a takeaway from, if you are in financial stress, like taking stock of your situation in a very calm and, a complete manner is really the first step. You cannot solve what you don't know and what you don't fully understand. So, make sure that if you do have financial stress, and actually sometimes people might not be even in the worst financial position and they still have financial stress, largely because they don't understand their financial position fully. And I think just knowledge at the end is always the first way to have control over anything that you want to have control. So I think making sure that you take full stock of the situation and ensure that you have that knowledge, and then think through calmly on your next steps. And yeah, to Linda's point, again, don't stop at only thinking about, once you are out of that stress situation, or if today you are in a good space, again, your finances are a tool for you to achieve more goals in your life. So focus on those goals, and then be very exigent with your finances, because they are the biggest empower of your goals, whether in the future you want to go back to school, or you want to have you want to start a company, or anything that you want to do. Your finances are the biggest tool to make them happen. So be exigent on them, and make sure you make the time to always keep track of them.
Really helpful points to make it there. Having knowledge, awareness of yourself and what you need to know as well as being and as you use exigent, the word towards your financial well-being as well. I think those are key things to be had for everyone tuning in. So this has been super insightful. We are at time for our session. First and foremost, thank you so much, Nandini, as well as Linda, for joining the session. I've learned a lot. I'm sure everyone listening in has as well, towards a very key part of our mental state, which is our financial wellness in that sense, right? It stresses us a lot, or it makes us feel good about ourselves in different ways. So thank you so much, Nandini and Linda, for both joining this session. We're going to wrap up this session right here. Thank you both so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank
for joining
you.
us. Have a great evening.